Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hopsgeeknews, your home for comic books, movies, TV shows, and typically Lauren and I feature a beer of the week. Today, we have a great creator-focused episode for you today because Dr. Sai Islam and Dr. Gordon Schmidt are going to be joining us to talk about their books that they have written about leadership in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as another one based around leadership in Avatar the Last Airbender. Lauren never quite got into Avatar the Last Airbender. However, I love that show. Loved it growing up. Me and my friends steeped into the show, and then Netflix, the revival. We completely ignored the movie, and that's a little testament to our leadership of our own. So, Lauren, I am drinking water because I still have yet to run tonight. So, are you drinking anything special tonight?
Just H2O as well.
H2O. I heard
We
Gatorade's better,
celebrated
actually.
we celebrated Father's Day last night or yesterday with all the fathers. So no beer today. I drank enough yesterday.
That's true. We did indeed. So I want to introduce our guests without further ado. So we'll start with Dr. Sai Islam, who is the Associate Professor of Psychology at Farmingdale State College. Welcome to the show. Something that we always like to get started with our folks is introduce yourself, first of all, and then what is your geek origin story? What got you into this culture that we have loved for a long time now?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Sai Islam. I wear a couple of different hats. I'm an associate professor over at Farmingdale State College out in New York. And I'm also vice president of consulting for Talent Metrics Consulting. And how I became steeped in geek culture is I was bitten by geek, and then I just could never find the head geek to kill. And I've just been stuck in this all this time. Now, actually, the reason I like geek stuff is primarily because of my brother. So, my brother is about 12 years older than me. He read a lot of comic books. He read a lot of mythology. He liked Planet of the Apes. He liked all of these different things that came up in the 70s and 80s. And then, just because I wanted to hang out with him and be with him, I ended up liking a lot of those things. And, he gave me my first big stack of comics, and that was what got me into reading in the first place, because prior to that I was just like watching TV as like a latchkey kid in the 80s.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, everybody remembers there was a lot of questionable parenting. Even though we're all here to escape our children, I think we have much fewer latchkey kids now, right?
Yes.
So I just learned to read from comic books, and then I started reading science fiction. And my brother was also a big Star Trek person, so there used to be Star Trek reruns late at night on Saturday nights on WPIX that we used to watch. I remember watching original Doctor Who on PBS when it was like part of like Masterpiece Theater, like before they realized that you could like genuinely monetize it.
Yeah.
So all that stuff was part of that geek birth in me, and I really enjoyed it. And I made a lot of friends in the community. And I when I was a kid, I had a hard time connecting with other kids, and the comic books and the TV series, they helped. You could at least say like, oh, I see you like G.I. Joe and Transformers. Well, I kind of like those things too, and you could have a conversation. So that never really left. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that still works as an adult. Oh, you like, that latest Marvel movie too? Let's talk about it. So I love that.
Yeah, that's it's a lot easier. I feel like it's easier now to be like, hey, I see this. You've got, like, for example, your Spider-Man mug. Oh, I like this. And then it just flows into the conversation from there versus, kind of growing up, it was a lot less in your face than it was now. Lauren and I had this conversation recently. But Gordon, over to you. Introduce yourself, and then also, like, what is your first big origin story?
Oh, sure. So I'm Gordon Schmidt. I am a professor of management at the University of Louisiana Monroe, and also I'm a director of the School of Management there. And so I teach courses on leadership and human resources and management and stuff, and do research on a whole bunch of interesting things, future work, pop culture, and using it to talk about the concepts of our field and things like that. What's my origin story? Well, it's a little bit different from Sai, in that I bit a geek, I think.
I think we finally found the head guy.
No, Sai. Well, the next part of the story will reveal that it's not Sai, so spoilers. But I'm pretty sure as a baby, I probably bit my father at some point, And my father was a big geek.
Mm.
Really into sci-fi, really into going to flea markets and buying old stuff. He was into toy trains. He was a big toy trains collector, and going out there and being, as a lot of geeks are nowadays, the toys of my childhood that I didn't have or I
Yes.
got rid of, I need them again.
Yeah.
And so for him,
It's
that was toy
too true.
trains. That was Gilbert toy sets. For a while, it was models. So he needed the Wolfman. He needed Frankenstein. And really trying to, the Guns of Navarone. He needed to right the wrongs of childhood where either didn't get the things or they get lost. And so I certainly had heard from him so many stories about that stack of comic books that darn kid in the neighborhood never gave back to him. Those types of things. And so I think there's a genetic component, certainly, to my own geekdom. And it was my dad who introduced me ultimately to comic books, first with his, and then through at this flea market, he bought a big box of comic books to resell at our garage sale. Make some money, right? It's all about the money.
Oh,
Capital,
yeah.
Hashtag. But that had the first Marvel comics I ever read in it. So it had Amazing Spider-Man. It had the Avengers. It had all this stuff, late 70s, early 80s. That was really how I moved beyond the kids' comic book type things I liked, which, weren't always perfectly for kids. The G.I. Joe comic book, that's not that kid when you look at it now, or even then one would think the Transformers, all of that stuff is what I read. And then my dad, but that comic book box got me into Marvel superheroes and all that. And I'll say my dad really cultivated a lot of those interests, because what we used to do is he would take me to comic shops and we'd buy the, quarter bin comic books that I was interested in. That started when I was still just into G.I. Joe and Alf and Transformers and He-Man. But it really ramped up once got into Marvel Comics. And so I think he actually got back into comics to sort of help nurture my hobby, because he started buying war comics, Indiana Jones comics, all the various 80s hysteria war comics about war with Russia. Maybe we're just delayed a little bit on that happening, but those things at the time that were pretty hot in the 80s. So I don't know how you could have cultivated it more. So I've got the genetics, I've got the cultivation, and so it's my dad's fault, I guess.
Yeah, the nature and the nurture.
Yeah,
I feel like not enough people. I mean, not enough of us have kind of come from that path. We don't hear that story too often. We ask this, it's our big origin stories. Superheroes have them, so we always like to give them, and very few people are like, oh, my parents got me into this, because my parents certainly never did. Lauren's mom's talked to oh, hey, your grandma
My mom was
like Doctor Who and stuff.
Closeted nerd, and never told me until I would get into something and she'd be like, you're watching Doctor Who? Oh my gosh, I watched Doctor Who in the 60s. I'm watching it now. I'm like, I didn't know that. You never told me that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting thing. My dad's interests are not the same as mine, but there's that same level of geek passion. His comics are different, war and sci-fi and all this. But he definitely was very encouraging.
Yeah.
But man, he always encouraged my hobbies. I remember once he convinced me to buy a portable 8-track player. He was like, "Oh, that'd be a good thing to buy. I'll put $5 towards that." That was never used. Or useful in any way. But yeah, so.
I mean, I'm like you. I with my kids, very big into the geek culture, and like sci. That's how we got into reading, and that's how my son's gotten into reading too. I've got an 8-year-old. And comic books are really how he started reading. So speaking of books, you guys have a couple books. So first of all, Leaders Assemble, about leadership in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So how did you guys come to meet and kind of collaborate onto this topic?
How did you two assemble on this
Yes.
project? And how did this project come to be? And tell us a little bit about it.
I believe Gordon sent me an email. So I think that was
Every exciting origin story starts with an email.
Every one of them, he said he was a Nigerian prince. I thought I was going to make a lot of money.
You sent him some money.
Neither was true.
Yeah. Then, he sent me an 8-track player instead. And I was like, what is this?
I charged him.
What do I do with this?
What is this ancient technology? No, we actually, so we have been talking about using pop culture in our coursework for quite a while. So Gordon and I are both trained in an area of psychology called industrial organizational psychology, psychology of work. We both have experience in kind of management education. And it's hard for people that have never had to manage people before, that haven't had to lead a group, or, even if they have had the experience, sometimes people don't imagine that they've got it. So one of the things that I tell my students a lot is, like, if you've been in a group project and you've been assigned as a leader, you have leadership experience. And they're like, no, that doesn't really count. I'm like, I'm telling you, it counts. It counts.
It definitely does. Yeah.
It definitely does.
Control.
Then they ask for extra credit. They're like, I'm a leader. Give me extra credit, son.
Well, that extra credit conversation usually happens after the semester is over, when it's too late for me to do anything about it. But we always talk about all these different examples that we used in class of, around pop culture, whether it was something, like The Office or, Marvel examples, because those movies just lend themselves to those conversations. And it's a lot of fun to kind of illustrate concepts and ideas using, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because, leadership can be seen. You can see people decide to follow or make a good leadership decision. And especially when you have superhero teams, there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to kind of, unpack for the students. And, it's more exciting than kind of the corporate conversations that you might have with like MBA students or executives, and it's something that's easier for them to grasp. And so, Gordon, I think you found that the series of books that we're a part of, the Exploring Effective Leadership Through Pop Culture series, right, at Emerald Publishing.
Yeah, so I just tried to make it sound more exciting. So if you thought that was boring, get ready for more. So on a listserv, it's 2004 all over again, people. Well, management listserv sent out a thing about, hey, we're doing this new series at Emerald Publishing called Exploring Leadership Through Popular Culture. And so they had come out with a book. They're coming out with a book soon on Star Wars and Middle-earth, which are great books. Michael Yurick wrote both those books, and they're like, we're looking for proposals. So my perspective on most stuff is, who knows? Who cares if you're qualified or not? They might be interested. And that's a perspective that's certainly been helpful to me. And so I emailed Cy and I was like, hey, why don't we try to submit something to this? And he was like, I've never even written a book chapter. I was like, don't worry about it. I got my one book from 2016. This will be fine. And so it's just kind of that spirit of, it'd be great to be able to write about this stuff. We talked about a few different topics at that time a little bit, but really Marvel movies seemed like the best choice just overall. Like, I would argue, Star Wars and Middle-earth, I love both of them, but I would still say Marvel movies are better illustrations of a lot of that stuff, right? Yeah. And so I was like, sure. The best option is still available. We should do a proposal on this, and so that's basically what happened. We did that proposal, and then the Avatar one as well as kind of a next thing, as being a very different universe, kind of a different setup of that. Mm-hmm. And so we're thinking of kind of like, you don't want to just write the same thing over and over again. We wanted to sort of have different lessons and different setup. So yeah, they liked our first proposal. And while we were just really starting to work on that, we submitted that second proposal. I would recommend to other people that you kind of like think about before you start joining up for a next book, before you finish the first book, personally. But that was not really our perspective. And I will tell you, Cy, you remember this. There was all kinds of discussion about a third book at that point as well. Mostly jokes, but Muppet leadership does sound amazing to me still. But we're like, I would agree. Which is good because, oh my God, I almost died getting out the second book, just from timing perspective. Got a new job, got a child, So I'm really glad we don't have a third book on the hook right now that we're late on or something like that. So. Cool.
Just like a baby,
definitely work.
Just like a baby, we're gonna forget how hard the second one was. And we'll be like, this seems like a good idea.
I've thought of ideas already, man. I'm already thinking so many directions again, but I'm gonna try to take at least a little bit of time off. We'll
we're gonna we're just gonna be talking about it one night. We'll get really, really wasted, and then all of a sudden there'll be another book proposal.
That's when the best ideas come out. I mean, that's
they're not
how this
from
podcast
emails,
came about. Yes.
If I think of a really great Muppet angle, like it's going to come out of me. I'm sure we're going to be proposing that book, and so I'm trying to really not think about the Muppets in any way lately, just to avoid the possibility of being forced.
Everywhere I go, I see his face. It's just giant Kermit the Frog everywhere.
I see Kermit everywhere now. Yeah, it's not a good sign.
Well, there are two funny things about the Muppets that I will mention. One, my wife, independent of me, has been watching Muppets Mayhem on Hulu. I don't know why. Apparently it was on her list to watch. I'm not influencing her in any way. And second, my nieces and nephews, when they were children, roasted me by saying that I sounded like Kermit the Frog.
Oh no!
They were
Oh
like,
my
yeah, and it was just like, and now nobody can unhear it.
Well, now when you guys make the book, you should do the audio. You can write.
I'll do the audio book.
The audio book on Audible and everything.
Absolutely.
They're trying to
I'm all for
inception
that.
you into this idea that you're like,
Oh my
no, but they're like,
gosh.
trust me. But I think like the big thing too with Marvel, I mean, it naturally makes sense. Talking from a leadership standpoint, is there's so many different personalities when you look at Marvel and the MCU that are really good, because how do they all blend together? How do they decide kind of who's the leader? Like de facto Captain America is the leader when you have guys like Thor who are strong, and Tony Stark is another big personality. So how did you guys navigate kind of through that and bringing those kind of like closing the loop, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I really think.
Oh no, go ahead, Gordon.
No, just to me, leadership always is muddy.
Yeah.
Like it always is unclear, because we kind of act, and this is something that we complain about all the time, is, a lot of discussion of leadership is, hey, somebody's a big CEO and everybody listens to them and they're super successful. So all you need to do is wear the same clothing every day and you'll create the next Facebook to steal everyone's private information, or whatever your goals are, buddy. I don't know. But it's such a weird way to look at leadership, because so much of leadership is people trying to figure out how to do things, us trying to influence each other, versus some big mucky muck who everyone thinks is an expert. And I'm sure for any of us that have worked in anything, it isn't like your boss says do something and you're like, oh, the boss is always right, I'm going to be motivated and do that. In fact, a decent percentage of the time we're like, what's that bozo talking about?
99% of the time.
We may not want to be fired, and so we do the thing. Or we don't, or we know some people that won't go along with it. So like, okay, we got to do it. We got to frame it differently, or we got to sell it. There's a lot of that I think gets lost in a lot of our portrayals and stuff. And that's what I love, with the Marvel superheroes, right? You got these people, they're saving the world on their own. And then you say, hey, we got this big threat out there. Thanos, Squirrel Girl, Galactus, whoever, the big three, obviously. How do we stop that? Well, I'll say Evil Squirrel Girl, which great book if you haven't seen Squirrel Girl versus Clone Squirrel Girl.
I love Squirrel Girls.
Great work by Ryan North. But they have to come together, all these different people with different perspectives, with, probably a little bit of arrogance, right? If you've saved the world 20 times, you probably think you're pretty good overall. Like, I think I'm pretty good. I've saved the world 0 times, maybe harmed it a little bit. I don't know. In my own way. And so they have to come together, all these different perspectives, and figure out, how do we make this happen? How do we bring our different skills? And to me, that is real life. We all got different perspectives, different preferences. There's people on Twitter that say Star Trek 5 is a good movie. I saw like multiple people comment on that. Like, that is insanity.
Thinks Batman vs Superman's a good movie.
I enjoyed that.
Gordon, do you want to tell everybody my deep
I
dark
believe
secret?
some of the Snyder films can actually be good, but every time I like to go to estate sales and garage sales and buy stuff. And so every time I see like a Snyder movie, I'll send it to him like, oh, should I buy this? And actually, I don't think I did this. I saw Justice League the other day. And I was like, oh, should I buy this for $1? And I'm like, if I email I'd be like, oh no, you can't buy that version. Obviously, the first version released is garbage. You need like the Snyder cut or something.
You do. I'm with him 100%.
You do need the Snyder cut. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Who doesn't want to sit there for 4 hours?
It's a magical 4 hours.
I had to watch it. It wasn't bad. I will say it was better than the first one, but I had to watch it in increments.
So that's the
going
thing.
to leadership.
It's broken into chapters, right? It's like,
it is.
It was. He knew we couldn't sit there that long. That's probably why I wasn't in theaters either. But it had nothing to do with COVID. But with leadership, obviously there's good leadership and bad leadership. So do you guys go into like the Red Skull was a great leader, but he was a terrible person. So do you go into just giving like motivation on
Lauren,
being
calm
a
down.
good
Where are we
can we
going? Where are we
unpack-
going with this?
Yeah,
where-
could we
Are you teaching
unpack
people how to
this?
take over the world?
I'm sorry, but I don't know if I'm following you. Lauren's views do not represent everybody on this show right now. It's just a little disclaimer, please.
Buddies on X, we're not against Red Skull at all.
Well, look, it depends on how you look at good leadership. Like some of the best leaders were terrible
So
people.
Lauren, I got a question.
So it's so do you define good leadership as being a good leader? Do you find good leadership as getting followers?
So the first question I always wonder with guys like the Red Skull or Cobra Commander is, where are their followers coming from? Are they just clones that are mind controlled into doing whatever they want? It's really interesting because there are different kinds of leadership, and so Red Skull is a very good example of a coercive leader, right? He's punishing anybody that doesn't do what he wants, and you could be that kind of leader, right? In history, historically, most leaders probably fit into that category of leader. If you think about where we derive leadership from in the past. In the past, you had kings and queens and this sort of patrilineal line of leadership, and if you didn't follow the leader, you were going to get injured or thrown into jail or whatever sort of punishment. But in a modern era where that happens less, hopefully, you've still got to have some sort of plan, some sort of vision. So the Red Skull has an evil vision, a horrific vision, but he can, as we've seen in the last few years, sometimes people are into a horrific and terrible vision for the future, which you can see in a variety of different settings, right? But when we're thinking about like leaders in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a lot of times we're thinking about some of those positive traits. And a lot of the characters in Marvel have these positive characteristics when it comes to leadership. And the way that we define leadership in the book, we kind of wanted to expand leadership beyond just like job titles. So I do some organizational consulting, I do some leadership development, leadership training. And when I talk to employees within organizations, they're like, well, I'm not a manager, I'm not a leader, I'm not anybody. And I'll have to give them this like more expanded view of what leadership is, which is that it's a process of social influence. So if you want to get something done within your organization, if it's you're talking about a plan within your team, you want your team to follow a particular alternative or a particular path. You're exercising leadership because you're trying to convince people to follow what you want to do. You may not have the formal title of project manager. You may not be, the king of your particular team, but you've still got the ability to influence. And that lets us have a much more flexible conversation around leadership and how leadership functions. Because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are characters that have enormous influence, but we wouldn't necessarily consider them to be the leaders of the team, right? Like Spider-Man can influence the Avengers, but nobody's saying like, oh, Spider-Man's the leader of the Avengers, right? But he gives like such a good, he has a passionate vision for certain things. He represents so much hope for so many of the characters. That's why in Endgame, when he disappears into a cloud of dust, lots of people took it so hard because he represented all of those things for people. And when he comes back, everybody's happy again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Spider-Man's your favorite superhero.
My favorite superhero? Maybe. That's a tough question to answer now, like 40 plus years into superhero fandom. I don't know if I have a favorite anymore. Like when I was a teenager, it definitely was like Wolverine.
He's lost his passion entirely. It's all mercenary for him. If you endorse Cy, you're his favorite superhero. Matt, Lauren,
hey!
Throw it at him. You're the best superhero.
Who's the most popular? Who's the most popular character that will inspire the most book sales? Is really the question.
Obviously, Ant-Man. Duh, guys. Ant-Man has a book. Clearly, you know who else?
I think it would be Wolverine, the leader who doesn't want to be a leader, who doesn't view himself as a leader, but is.
He's actually maybe the best mentor on the X-Men. Right, he provides the best mentorship to Kitty Pryde, to Jubilee. Yeah. He has that caring, even though he acts like he doesn't want to be a mentor. He always ends up in that role. He always provides that level of support. He even mentored Ms. Marvel, right? Like he's just the guy that you go to if you have questions, and he's not going to sugarcoat it. So definitely,
Wolverine is basically a toothless version of the Fonz. That's my feeling on it. He doesn't have the wing killer edge.
No.
Oh no.
Well, he doesn't go. He doesn't, as long as he doesn't jump any sharks.
He probably has. Like Wolverine's been in so many stories. Like literally every
He's
story I'm
fought
on.
Sharks.
Yes.
I know in the last one with Ben Percy, he definitely fights a giant shark. So before we go into Avatar the Last Airbender, though, I do want to say the MCU book, The Leaders Assemble, I found it on Amazon. So it came out 2 years ago. So if somebody wanted to pick up that book, is there anywhere else they can find it other than Amazon, or is that the go-to spot?
I would say that is the go-to spot. It's in other bookshops as well, whether it's Barnes and Noble or any other place where you can get a book. It might be in your library. So definitely any
forget
place
about that resource.
I love libraries.
Your local libraries, yeah, they have so much.
People say libraries, Barnes and Noble. Why could you do that when I can just shop and have it delivered to my doorstep? It's still nice to go out in public, believe it or not. Especially like libraries, they're a nice, comforting place.
Absolutely.
Well, and they're free. Well, you mean you pay their tax dollar, but like they're free. Take advantage of it. They got classes for the kids and
half
books
a mile from
and
my house.
DVDs. If anybody still has a DVD player,
I get a lot of DVDs.
If you have a PlayStation, you probably have a DVD player, unless you got the discless version, in which case I can't help you. But
well, now your laptops don't even have CD-ROMs anymore.
No,
my daughter asked if she could move the DVD player into her
what are we doing?
room for something. Yeah, I don't know. All right, so Matt, I'm going to let you take the ball here since I'm not into Avatar. So let's move on to the new book that is coming. When is this one coming out?
2025? Oh no! Oh, wait, is it November 12th? Oh, 2024. Oh man!
From its release date.
Man, they made it. They moved it up.
Ooh,
all right. Good to know.
He's like, we have a book coming out this year. What?
They're 2025 is the Muppets one, right?
Yeah, they moved it up so they can get the Muppet release out next November. Actually, maybe. But no, this one we see Avatar: The Last Airbender is vastly different than MCU, which has a lot of leadership examples, whereas kind of that coercive leadership we were talking about with like the Fire Nation could be used as a good example of that. Aang could be a different form of leader. So kind of how did you guys shift gears from talking about maybe a lot of different leadership aspects to one that might be a little bit more difficult to some people in Avatar, The Last Airbender?
Good question. I'll start. I think it was, really talking about doing something different with it. And so, I think Avatar is really interesting as a world just with you've got these 4 nations with different values, different perspectives. You've got this world that's really superhero worlds are kind of weird because they're literally always in peril.
Yeah.
But it seems like the default kind of is like, there's a lot of crazy stuff, but everything's fine. Like the Avatar world is legitimately like out of balance with the Fire Nation, right? There's a way things should be and it isn't. And so a lot of the superhero universes do that for a little while. All the heroes die or become zombies or whatever it is, but it's just a storyline, right? And then it ends and you move on probably. Like what Blood Hunt is going on right now in the comics and people are vampires. The vampires are not going to win. Just throwing it out there.
Tell me T'Challa as a vampire is going to stick?
I'm sorry, guys.
Hey, spoilers.
But, whoever became a vampire, they ain't staying that way. Sorry, guys. But with Avatar, it's like we've had a world out of balance for like, what? 100 years?
Yeah.
This long period of time where there's been problems and things are kind of getting worse. And there's really a need for leadership. There's a need for somebody to bring this all together. And there's sort of a need for sort of the ethics, right? And moving that forward. And I think that that's a really interesting place to be and to really think about. And so that's what we talk about a lot within this book that's a little different. It's that cross-cultural, it's kind of balance within yourself, balance in the world. It's got that sort of ethical component as well of what are the values, what should we do? Because that's the other thing. Aang is, a pacifist essentially, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these questions about should Aang, kill the Fire Lord? Should he, what should they be doing? What's the most valuable thing? And I think it's kind of nice that Avatar is not nearly as focused as much on fighting, because like superheroes are kind of for peace, but it's a peace where you punch someone in the face and still they're peaceful. And then if they look, and once they start to look like they're evil again, you punch them again. And if they're not evil yet, you apologize, but you probably punch them one more time to make sure they don't go back.
Make sure they're
And
not
so it's a
brainwashed anymore.
different setup
How many
with what
times
they
did
do.
you teach you this lesson, old man?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's really what we liked about it. You know, you've got kind of that the Team Avatar is kind of an interesting group where each of them have different skills, different perspectives as well. And ultimately, you've got a lot of representation of different nations, right?
Yeah.
That group that comes together is ultimately across the different groups. And I think A Legend of Korra is really interesting as well too, with looking at this kind of this shadow of Aang, this world that's kind of got it together differently. But how do you deal with that shadow of that amazing Avatar that everyone remembers, and having to deal with trying to live in that? Because if you look at that, like Korra's got some crazy thing where she's like a toddler or 5 or something, and can do 3 out of the 4 elements, right? And yet we're really looking at her a few years later as if, oh, she's a screw up and can't handle what Aang's doing. And so it's a really interesting, different dynamic in that, which I guess now we're she's kicking the bucket, and we're going to have a new Avatar soon with a new series. And it's just a really interesting kind of setup with that I think gets at a lot of leadership, teamwork topics, and just dealing with people different than you, because that's what the world is. Sai, you've got elements I didn't cover.
So yeah, actually, there's one really interesting overlap between both the MCU book and the Avatar books. So one of the things that we noticed in writing the Marvel Cinematic Universe book was that there's very few female leaders in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's more female leaders in Marvel Comics, like Photon, who I believe Gordon and I agree is like maybe the best Avengers leader from the 80s and 90s, best West Coast Avengers leader by a lot. But you know, and you have other leaders like Storm, great leader in the comics. But even when I do training using, you know, these superhero examples, sometimes I get the feedback that, oh, we wish there were more female MCU leaders. And that's a legitimate kind of complaint about those characters, because there aren't enough of them. And as we were watching the movies, Gordon made this discovery where he noticed that there's a thing that happens to real life, you know, female leaders that happened to Black Widow in the movies, which was that, you know, women are often put into leadership positions for companies or organizations that are struggling. And when does Black Widow take on like official, oh, she's the leader of the Avengers, is after the snap. When the blip happens, oh, guess who keeps it all together? It's Black Widow.
Yeah.
And I remember Gordon messaged me about this, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so how this relates to Avatar the Last Airbender is there's quite a few female leaders in Avatar the Last Airbender. There's more in Avatar, I think, than there are in the MCU as it is currently constituted. And there's a lot of different types of female leaders that you can see. And so it's not just that we're talking about like differences across these cultures and cross-cultural differences, but there's a lot more diversity in a variety of different ways with the characters. And you can see them and what approach they use to kind of influence others and to move things forward. And I think that makes it really, really interesting. From our perspective as professors, Avatar 22-minute episode is a little bit easier for us to use in class as well than a full-on, you know, endgame type movie.
So do you show clips of the movies and break it down with the psychology of the leadership and all that? Do you actually open the movies during class?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an example. We talk about this theory called servant leadership. And servant leadership is when a leader, you know, puts themselves in the way of obstacles that a follower might face. And so there's like a GIF of skinny Steve Rogers jumping on a grenade before he has any superpowers. And so that's an example of servant leader, somebody who's going to
he'll jump on a grenade for you. That's how much he loves you.
Yeah, but he's still skinny.
He's still skinny.
Yeah, you'd still blow up. It would just go, you know, right around him and kill you too. But
yeah, right.
It's the thought that counts, right, Steve?
No, I think I had a professor in law school that for ethics, he would show clips of legal movies and then say, okay, what did they do wrong? What ethically was incorrect? And everybody wanted that professor for ethics because it was engaging and you were more likely to remember it because you had an actual like positive association. So I think that's a great teaching tool. And that was one of my questions and it came up naturally. So I think that's really cool that you guys do that.
I definitely agree. And it's fun too, especially like today, like everybody loves things like, Avatar, everybody loves things like Marvel, and it's very relatable. And I find, with the younger generation, God, every time I say it now, because I'm in a leadership
Younger
role at work.
generation.
Well, I'm in a leadership role myself. So like a lot of the
Yeah.
old heads in my org are like, how do we reach the youth? And I'm like, guys, it's really not that hard. Like just be relatable. And kind of what you guys are doing is like pop culture. It's a perfect time to use it. You can spin it around and, use it to teach something. And that's kind of how you're going to get people to engage, which I think is really fascinating that I've never really seen people think about that before. So what you guys did with these two books, the one Leaders Assemble, which came out 2 years ago, and then obviously Leadership within the Avatar the Last Airbender that's getting ready to come out this November.
Yes.
That's
This November.
It's actually really fascinating. And I know for me, that's something I want to read and I want people to read. When you hear all these leaders out there like, this is on my reading list. Well, I want to see something like this on there more, because I think that's how you're going to get a lot of people to listen to you guys. But kind of like our last kind of question here as we begin to wrap up is, do you guys have a favorite MCU moment or one that sticks out to you in particular?
Favorite MCU moment? Well, there's one that I don't know. This changes from time to time, but one that I think about a lot, especially from a leadership perspective, is the ending of Black Panther, when T'Challa offers Killmonger an opportunity to save his life. He says, "Hey, I'm gonna, I can still save you," right? And I think that's really important to talk about, because especially in like an American context, when we think about leadership, we think of it as like this zero-sum game. I won, you lost, you suck, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, that's a lot of us think about it this way. But somebody like the Black Panther, somebody like T'Challa, he looks at, and this is something he did going back to Civil War, right? Where he looked at Zemo.
Yeah, it was Zemo. Yeah.
It was Zemo. He has this compassion and he says, "You're lost. I wanted to kill you. I don't want to kill you anymore, but I'm gonna put you in jail because maybe there's something that can be changed." And he can look at somebody like Killmonger, somebody who's exposed the country, ruined ruined so many things in a very short period of time, and he still says, "I can save you." There's something there that he wants to kind of change into something good. And I think there's something really important, especially given the times we live in. I think there's something valuable to that as a lesson, that you don't have to destroy the other person that you have a disagreement with. You can find a way, once you've proven, whatever your side is, whatever is correct, you can find a way to rebuild that relationship, especially in the work context, right? Like if you win an argument with a coworker, you can win it in such a way where the relationship is destroyed, and then you still have to see that person the next day, right? Like that's not great. And so I think it's an important lesson. It's something, especially the imagery in that scene, with the sun shining through Wakanda.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that always kind of sticks in my head.
Yeah, I was going to say, the prison break in Guardians of the Galaxy, I think is a great scene where you've got different people providing their different knowledge, right? And it's just like, you just see their different perspectives and angles and all of that. You've got kind of Rocket has this knowledge and people are very open to it, right? There's not a big, it's like, okay, how are you resolving this? What are we doing? Which is what we should be doing generally when we're in a group. Somebody's got the knowledge of it. We talk about this idea of shared leadership. In shared leadership, people come up and are leaders when it's their expertise area, when they have the time or the bandwidth. And it's a really great example of that, where it doesn't need to be the one person is in charge. It's who's the best at this. And that is Rocket, and the other people bring their own parts into it, their own perspectives. But he's leading the show because he is the best at the thing that we are doing. And I think that that's something we need to do more than just the boss. The boss makes all the calls and makes all decisions because they're brilliant. A lot of times somebody on the group has a better idea or has better experience, and that's who we should be listening to in large part.
Yeah, right. Honestly, like, man, that you guys hit it right on the head, man. Really right on the head as far as that goes. And now for anybody who out there who maybe wants to hear a little bit more, I know they can get the book on Amazon for $27, and you can get it in 2 days, man. You can get it in 2 days, or you can go to Barnes & Noble. But where can people find you guys? If there's any social media, anything that you guys do out there, where can they find you specifically?
So I think we're old and we're on LinkedIn. quite a bit.
Are you
You
on
know?
the LinkedIn rants where people just? I love to see like the rants on LinkedIn these days. It's become so unhinged.
I don't think either of us rant really. We post a lot on there, but we're also still on Twitter and on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
So you can find us on those platforms. I don't know how Instagram works very much.
None of us do. That's the secret.
Yeah, like I don't take that many pictures. Most of them are off center, and most of them now are of my kids, so I'm not posting anything there. And
I made a TikTok once, so I will
you did. Wow.
Oh man, well that's great. I mean, I'm more with you guys, man. We don't really none of us know how it
You
works.
can, if you go to Amazon and you find this book, you can follow them as authors. So then when the next book comes out, it should come up on your feed.
Wow,
You
Lauren
definitely
with the save.
well, it's good. And if anybody out there does pick up this book from this, like by all means, let all of us know. I would love to hear like everybody's thoughts because I think it's something that you can take. That's like this is a topic that there's something that's going to reach everybody out there. And I would
And if you
encourage
like it, leave a
everybody.
review on Amazon.
Yeah,
I will say as well. I'm not sure why Cy doesn't bring this up. His consulting site, talentmetrics.io, we blog on it.
yes,
Cy, you're the one who makes the most money for your consulting firm. But we blog about pop culture topics connected to management and psychology topics. So we've done a lot of fun ones. We've talked about Taylor Swift songs. We've talked about
they
a
let
lot
some
of
in.
Marvel TV. Anti-hero and self-awareness, it goes together perfectly. Actually, got 2 more Taylor Swift ones still in the writing phase. We'll see what happens.
Son of a bitch, I'm in.
Whenever we get a chance to do it. I actually did one on Barbie and job motivational characteristics.
That's
because
fun.
if you think about stereotypical Barbie as a job, it's really interesting. So I definitely recommend looking at that if you get that opportunity.
My job is
basically the blog has been a good way for us to do smaller things as we watch something, to throw something up on a topic. And so that has been a lot of fun. I actually am kind of glad we didn't realize that before we wrote the book, because then I don't think we would have wrote a book. We would just made a lot of silly, like 600-word things. And it probably did delay writing Avatar, was how easy it was to be like, I watched a TV show. Let me say something on Loki. So I think, thankfully for that. But we're back up to speed and maybe Muppet leadership, 2026.
There you
November
go.
25.
You heard it here.
Sorry, it's already booked. I don't tell you, but no, you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing that with us. I think it's really fascinating. It's a topic that I love to talk about. So thank you guys for coming on and sharing with us. And for everybody out there, make sure you go pick this up. Like you said, you can go to Amazon. You can probably go to your local library. No matter where you find it, kind of let us all know where you do find it. Because books, man, I'm a big physical copy person when it comes to books. My wife listens to audiobooks. I think she's a serial killer for it. So I got to have I can't have somebody read to me. I'm weird. I'm ADHD. It doesn't work that way. So go pick up this book up, man, read it. And then as always, make sure you follow Lauren and I, subscribe, and for lots more good things out there. And thank you guys for hanging out, and we will see everybody next time. Cheers.